finally saw Across the Spider-Verse. As you might imagine, I have thoughts. But number one with a bullet, though, is Gwen is clearly trans in this.
She's not, but cool story, bro.
Didn't they confirm that she wasn't trans, though?
She isn't, and before you say on how she has a trans flag in her room and how her dad has a trans pin and her universe colors are the trans colors, she's not, so calm down.
She ain't trans because that shot just showed the emotions of what she is going through, not that she is trans. Secondly, just because her costume has trans colors and she has a trans flag in her room doesn't mean she's trans, and she clearly shows some romantic interest in Miles.
First of all, just because she has a trans flag means she's trans. That's like saying anyone who has a Ukraine flag to support Ukraine is Ukrainian. And you might be screaming, but her dad has a trans pin. It's his stripes. And how Gwen dresses doesn't make her trans. That's just dumb.
She isn't trans. If you believe so, you're just desperate.
Gwen Stacy is not trans. Deal with it.
Oh God, please. Okay. I survived! Dear Spider Jesus, everyone, please calm down. Oh, also, I apologize for this mess that I'm sitting in right now. I don't have my fancy set yet because everything I own is currently in boxes or in this pile of eclectic stuff that I own because I've just been moving to a new apartment and I'm also directing a movie that's filming in less than a month. So I've been a little bit overwhelmed lately. And I figured, since I've been dealing with a lot, hell, hopefully the internet can just be chill about trans stuff for like a second. Right? Right?
Repeated targeted harassment against any account will cause the harassing accounts to receive at minimum temporary suspensions. The words cis or cisgender are considered slurs on this platform.
Nope, I ain't even touching that. I have no spoons for the gasps of a silly capitalist man grasping at the straws of relevancy with transphobia to hide one of the most visible displays of billionaires' intrinsic uselessness and incompetence ever. No, I'm here to talk about much, much more important stuff. Cartoons!
You got a problem with cartoons?
More directly, cartoon representation, because we all know that nothing represents me as a trans person more than being overly animated.
Can you float through the air when you smell a delicious pie?
What? So today, as I sit in my dumpster fire of a room, I want to talk about how there's been a trend in many recent films lately, especially in animation, with these films being discussed within a transgender context. Even more specifically, I want to talk about how we engage with a work that may feature trans themes or characters, and how often, especially in mainstream discourses, we fail to grapple with what that means intrinsically to represent a transgender character. What does it mean to represent queerness and transness beyond simply, hey look, I have a transgender flag in a thing, I did it, we did the transes, we put pink and blue next to white, we did a trans now. Yeah, transness is more than that. Though I do like doing this. This is fun. This is more fun than I thought it would end up being. Anyways, recently, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse came out and was an absolute revelation. In a summer movie season dominated, or perhaps not so dominated if you look at the box office returns, by the same systemic churn of movies featuring the same old superhero stories, Fast and Furious 15,000 or whatever number we're on. By the way, Jason Momoa killed it in that movie.
All right, dorks, what are we blowing up? What? The Vatican? Wow. You guys are going to hell.
And recycled sexagenarian colonialist grave robber heroes from the 1980s. No, Indy, it doesn't belong in a museum, it belongs to the people who made it in the first place. Spider-Verse was a breath of fresh air because this movie just has so much going on. Like, we could endlessly talk about its racial representation, its discussion of systemic injustice, and also just it being a really cool visual feast superhero film. Like, it's genuinely amazing, and it's even more amazing that it came out of like the superhero industrial movie complex. Yet despite all of these many things that we could talk about this film for, one of the biggest and most significant capital D like in Dick discourses surrounding the movie before it even came out was centered around, shocker of shocks, trans people. Cause the internet can't be chill about trans people for even a second.
new Spider-Verse movie that's coming out from Sony Pictures now apparently is promoting transgender ideology in the latest trailer by promoting a Protect Trans Kids flag. Why is this in this movie? I have no idea. But again, that's all the Spider-Verse is for. The Spider-Verse is the shill for identity politics. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets a car kind of a thing, and everybody gets a Spider-Man.
Their sequel seems to be shoehorning a ton of woke stuff, quite frankly. And the most egregious of them all is promoting the mutilation of children through a flag that says protect trans kids.
They're trying to brainwash the children into God knows what. I don't know why. But it's like, why does a kid need to know what a trans person is? Well, there shouldn't be trans kids. If you're trans, do that shit when you turn 18, not Jesus.
It says protect trans kids. And this little girl or whoever this is kind of walking through a door, and they got this subliminal message right here. You know, I read the Bible, and the Bible talks about the end times. But I did not know that we were this close.
Yes, the simple appearance of a trans-supportive poster in the background of Spider-Gwen's room that appeared in the movie's trailer was enough to start up the culture war machine, with people gaining rage clicks from apparently across the Spider-Verse promoting woke ideology and child grooming because trans people have become the scapegoat target of the rising fascism in the United States and elsewhere. The mere mention of our presence within anything provokes childish backlashes to gain attention, money, and relevance by being horrible, all stoked upon the vilification of transgender people. I mean, to use a recent example, who the fuck had thought about Kid Rock in decades until his recent temper tantrum about Bud Light? Like legit, I forgot he was still alive.
Grandpa's feeling a little frisky today.
Yeah, once you realize that, it kind of puts many people's, especially Elon Musk's recent anti-trans bullshit in perspective, doesn't it? It's all they have left.
It's all you have left, Elon. It's the only way you can stay relevant. Shitty transphobic tweaks can't pay your rental lease debt, can they? Sucks to be on the shitty side of capitalism for once, doesn't it, Elon?
Though knowing billionaires, he won't stay there long. Anyways, by the time Across the Spider-Verse came out, even the anti-woke crowd couldn't deny that the film was freaking amazing and was destroying at the box office. So the whole go woke, go broke narrative didn't really work. So eventually they settled on, well, it was just a poster in the background, so this movie isn't all that political. It's just, you know, they do these little woke things in the background, but the movie is not really that political at all. It was only like a little dash of wokeism. This wasn't really woke.
Jokes aside, it's obvious Gwen isn't trans and this was just some random political shit thrown in there. But I'm just glad it was in the background and not thrown in our fucking faces. It's not like Spider-Verse was being obnoxious about it. There's way too much in Spider-Verse to love for me to get mad about some dumb political shit in the background.
This despite, you know, the film having a lot of political things to say, which we'll get to, by the way. But pertinently, to the anti-woke crowd, the visual appearance of a trans person or a queer person, the physical representation of trans people within a work, was not there for them to get angry at, so they could deny all of the political aspects of the film. Because that's really all they can really think about in terms of discussions around trans and queer topics. Yet, at the same time, many trans people, especially young trans women, saw the movie and started to feel like they related to the character of Spider-Gwen. Trans folks flocked in droves to the internet to talk about what that character meant to them. Hell, I did a whole roundtable discussion on it that you can check out over on my secondary channel. Many even began to argue that Spider-Gwen was transgender within the universe of the film, finding quick identifiable examples of things to cite that proved that Spider-Gwen was 100% definitely transgender within the story. They cited the transgender poster in her room, as well as the scene where Gwen comes out to her father as Spider-Woman being framed in the colors of the transgender flag. And also things like her father's cop uniform featuring a trans flag in the frame at some point. Yeah, I don't know about that last one. It would be weird if a cop was like, yeah, trans flag on my uniform. I don't think that's happening. But that, along with the other example, showcases how people are trying to grasp and find any tangible, definitive proof that Gwen was explicitly transgender in order to argue the validity of the point that Gwen is trans, and thereby it was okay as a trans person to relate to her character on such a deep, profound level as many transgender people did. But on that note, here's the thing. Those signifiers of explicit transness, from the poster to the colors, were not the reason that trans folks resonated with Spider-Gwen. As much as people like to think that all transgender people see pink, blue, and white together and go, oh my god, it's trans! Okay, we do that to some extent. Those colors are nice, but they're not substantive in terms of what trans people resonate with. No, the reason that many trans folks related to Gwen was because of much more profound things with her character. For example, Gwen, at the start of the film, is hiding a part of herself from her father, who is a cop, by the way, someone whose whole job is to uphold a system that she, Spider-Gwen, is trying her best to live up to, but has to work outside of that system as a vigilante.
This mask is my badge, and I'm trying to be good too.
Gwen desperately wants to fit in, to pass at who she's supposed to be, yet never feels like she can live up to the expectations of her socially assigned role. Gwen has a desire to just fit in, like many trans women who just want to be seen as their actual gender identity do. The goal for some trans people is to pass in society, to not be read as trans or different, but just be seen as themselves, to not be seen as abnormal, but to be able to conform in a way that would stop making them feel uncomfortable for how they're seen, but still fit into a role who some trans people see as still part of a functioning society. This is also reflective sometimes of a desire of someone who has not faced other visible systemic marginalizations like being disabled or being a person of color, and doesn't realize at first that sometimes there is no way to fit the system that will always read you as an outsider. Basically, Spider-Gwen has the potential makings of a girl boss, but thankfully that is not where her story goes, as we'll see.
I always wanted to be in a band. Guess I just never found the right one.
Spider-Gwen wants to be seen as her full, true self, but can't be, and is constantly vilified by the cops and police around her, even while attempting to uphold that system's status quo by catching criminals and villains. Spider-Gwen's own father constantly tries to hunt her down. And this resonates with real life. Cops are known to be unsafe to many transgender people, with trans people being 7 times more likely to experience physical violence while interacting with the police, even more so if they are trans people of color. However, later on, when Spider-Gwen is forced to reveal her identity to her father at gunpoint, he reacts to this discovery about her true self with violence and anger, continuing to hold his gun at her and yelling that she killed his symbolic son.
I've thought about telling you, but you can see why I didn't want to. You can see why I didn't want to tell you. I didn't murder Peter. I didn't know it was him. I didn't have a choice.
How long have you been lying to me?
Within Spider-Gwen's universe, within the Spiderverse, her version of Peter Parker was like a brother, a found family member and sibling to her and to her family. And Gwen's father blames Gwen for killing someone that he viewed as a son, as he sees Gwen being Spider-Woman having led directly to that version of Peter Parker's death within the film. But in real life, many trans women, when we come out to our parents, are told that we are symbolically killing their son, with parents often refusing to see the person, the woman, in front of them who needs love for who they are, not rejection for who the parents wanted them to be. When I was coming out as a trans person, one of my biggest fears was telling my dad that I was trans because I just didn't want him to be disappointed that he wasn't going to see his son grow up to be the man that he wanted to see grow up and be successful. And Gwen's father is playing directly into that fear on a symbolic level, talking about Peter Parker as a symbolic son who Gwen killed by being her true self of Spider-Woman, by being a woman. Gwen, like many trans people, felt alone and isolated. And so Gwen goes and finds a new family of people like her, the queer found family of spider people that she finds, a new system of folks to find love and acceptance within. However, later on in the movie, Gwen's father does eventually accept her when she comes out to him as a woman, as a Spider-Woman on her terms. And his moment of acceptance of seeing her vulnerability and seeing her true self is also coded alongside his retiring from being a cop.
I took an oath.
Then arrest me, Dad. Get it over with.
I can't.
Why not?
Because I quit.
When?
About halfway through your big speech.
Like, it is very clearly coded within the film that him retiring from being a police officer is seen as a moment of accepting Spider-Gwen as her full true self, as a Spider-Woman, explicitly connecting his acceptance of her being at odds with his function as an agent of state power, of the status quo. All of these things, and a few things that I haven't even touched upon, are why Gwen resonates with a transgender experience far beyond simply a trans flag appearing in the background in her room, whether or not she is canonically trans within the universe of the story. Yet many trans people felt that they had to argue for why these themes resonated with them through the lens of having to validate that resonance with us having to find explicit clues of Gwen being canonically trans. It's this constant pressure that many trans people feel that we need to argue the validity of our resonating with a character like Gwen because we feel like people won't believe us or won't see what we see otherwise. And that is sometimes very clearly borne out. As the opening of this video showed, people were ready as hell to say that
no, Gwen is not explicitly transgender and she was never meant to be, therefore you can't identify with her at all.
There are probably a few dozen viral tweets like the one you're looking at now who are claiming that the character Gwen Stacy is transgender. Now, they base this off of probably 2 frames from the recent film, and mostly, well, you guessed it, their headcanon.
So the are making everything about them again, and this time the target is Gwen Stacy, specifically in her Across the Spider-Verse iteration. They're saying that, in fact, Gwen is trans. I'm trying not to... How do you even say this without laughing?
The biggest piece of propagandistic imagery is Gwen Stacy, who is Spider-Woman in an alternate universe, has above her door a giant flag that says "Protect Trans Kids." So she's obviously, at the very least, a left-winger. So this has driven a huge number of people on the Twitters and in the gay press to suggest that actually Gwen Stacy is a dude.
It's also very telling that every single one of these denials of the potential trans representation in the film also comes coupled with those doing it stating transphobic slurs or repeating transphobic narratives like trans people are groomers, being trans is inherently child abuse, that trans people are narcissistic, mentally ill, all ways to make trans people seem monstrous, abnormal, or perversions, which is something we'll be coming back to later in this video.
They are legitimately insane. They're so narcissistic that they project themselves onto anything. It is utterly madness, and I thought
Indicative of this instant rejection of anything to do with transness surrounding the character of Gwen, a violent rejection of it, all had to center around rejecting the canonical representation of Gwen as a trans person. Just as all these people got upset around similar discussions of wokeness at the poster appearing in the story in the first place, because many of these folks have no deeper understanding of what it means to be transgender other than the very visible, very clear, explicit denotations of things being transgender, like, a trans flag within the text, or a character being explicitly trans. These folks arguing that, hey bro, Gwen isn't canonically canon in the comics of the movie, so you're wrong, miss that Across the Spider-Verse is directly about questioning the validity of canon.
Take, for example, how the logo of the Comics Code Authority opens both Spider-Verse movies. The Comics Code Authority was a comic self-regulation code that explicitly limited queer representation as well as explicitly mandated that police and political institutions be presented as always correct. It also thereby forced any potentially queer representation to be found in comics to be queer-coded in subtleties and hints, kind of like how Spider-Gwen herself is coded within the film itself. The CCA was itself created in the 1950s after a moral panic was started by Frederick Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent, a book which accused comics of grooming children into a queer lifestyle. Where have I heard that before? Here again we see the system reinforcing itself after those who broke its rules by simply existing started to gain attention, and the Spider-Verse films are textually referencing this anti-queer history of comics and potentially hinting at how to read the film's queer themes and characters by stating that this film itself was symbolically put through the CCA. Maybe allegorically referring to the way that the film itself had to be censored by the Hollywood system, which similarly self-regulates.
The whole second half of the movie features the film's main protagonist, Miles Morales, visiting a literal Spider-Verse universe, and having Spider-Man 2099 tell him, in his sexy Oscar Isaac broody voice, that all Spider people have to have canonical events, like the death of a family member, in order to be valid Spider-Men, lest the entirety of existence crumble around them.
Canon events are the connections that bind our lives together. that those connections can be broken. That's why anomalies are so dangerous.
There's a certain amount of prejudice and discrimination or trauma that you have to experience to be a valid spider person. And believe me, having heard from many TERFs saying you're not a valid woman because you haven't experienced the specific traumas that specific cisgender women, mostly white cisgender women, have experienced, means you're not really a woman, I resonate with that very much. Again, questioning what it means for things to be canon, things to be a specific way. Miles is still a Spider-Man. He's proven that over and over and over again between this film and the last, despite not having any of these canonical moments, despite him being a literal glitch in the universe and the Spider-Man system.
You're not supposed to be Spider-Man! No! You're lying! I'm Spider-Man! You're a mistake! If you hadn't been bit, your Peter Parker would have lived. Instead, he died, saving you.
And so, he rebels, saying that he can change the system. He can save his dad, who was supposed to die in a canonical event. And all of that discussion is explicitly framed within the word canon, something that many comic book nerds and, Star Trek nerds, because believe me, as a Star Trek nerd, I know discussions about canon often frame about what it means to be a true version of a character. Believe me, there are so many discussions that I've got into with people saying, well, modern Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Strange Worlds isn't really canon because it doesn't follow these explicit rules. Oh, they have a holodeck in the 23rd century.
Similarly, many of these folks argue that for Gwen to be trans, there needs to have been a history of a canon Spider-Man that was trans. It needs to be seem like it's been normal by virtue of it having a long history within the story of Spider-Man. And more on that later when we talk about our next film.
These are the type of inane comic book arguments that many people get into to try to devalidate someone liking something or for something to be accepted as part of the community or story around certain characters and universes and fictions that we've come to love. But it's all made up, it's all bullshit, it doesn't matter. It's a movie about how systems of power try to create rules, but that the rules are not built for everyone, but often by those in power, and how these systems try to tell people that they don't belong.
Miles Morales is an Afro-Latina boy. He recognizes from his multiracial and racialized position in society that he might never fit in these golden gleaming towers of capitalism, something that we see explicitly mentioned to him by his mother.
And he never lets anyone at those big fancy places he's gonna be in tell him that he doesn't belong there.
This is similar to how many parents of color often have to teach their children in the United States the ways in which they will not be safe due to the color of their skin, often from police. A connection to Spider-Gwen's experience with police herself. It's also by no means a coincidence that Spider-Punk, the most anti-fascist and anti-systemic character, is also black and self-aware of his place within this system.
Just don't enlist, you know what war you're fighting.
It also should be noted that Spider-Punk is wearing blue shoelaces, which in punk circles is a code that someone killed a cop. Meaning that Spider-Punk's canon event might have been him killing a cop, which itself feels like a break from canon, but perfectly fitting for Spider-Punk.
And by the way, for further discussion of that, I'd recommend the conversation that I did over on my secondary channel, or this one that was hosted by FD Signifier on his channel, to hear more about the racial aspects of this film and how they connect with this reading. Spider-Gwen herself is inspired by Miles' rebellion. She looks to be a part of this newfound spider family and system, but then begins to realize through Miles that even here, her acceptance as a full spider person is conditional upon her being a good employee. I mean, a good Spider-Gwen. I mean, it's by no means a coincidence that Spider-Gwen is working for the CEO man in a giant gleaming skyscraper tower that presumably he's paid the rental lease for. So Spider-Gwen rebels against this system, forming another found family, a new band, as the film says, outside of that system in order to save those who need saving along with Miles. Even the whole movie visually is chaotic, bucking the trend of Hollywood saying that you need one consistent art style within a work or you can't sell a movie or people won't get it. Hell, this movie had freaking a Lego scene and a live action scene within it. So by arguing that Gwen isn't canonically transgender in the comics or the movie, therefore a transgender reading or resonance with the film isn't valid, is not only missing how people find resonance with representation in films, but the entire theme of the work itself. Many of these people arguing against resonance to a transgender theme due to a lack of explicit representation are often the same people who are always represented in films, who have never had to look beyond the surface level of a character in order to see themselves. Meanwhile though, trans people and queer people generally have been trained for decades to relate to people on screen who are not ourselves. I love my Captain America or my Superman or hell my Peter Parkers because despite me not being a cis dude, I found a lot that I related to within those characters. But to those rarely asked to give that empathy, to be able to relate to people who don't visually look like them, many aren't trained to see beyond the surface level. This is who I have to be, the strong guy protagonist who must always save the day by himself because he's the hero. And so they aren't trained to see past the surface level of a work of art. They aren't prepared to engage with a work's deeper themes. And they aren't prepared to discuss how Spider-Verse itself is intrinsically queer and trans, not just because a character might be able to be read as transgender if you find enough hints and clues about it.
I know you know I've been lying to you. It's because I thought if you knew, you wouldn't love me the same.
But queer and transgender in its themes of outsiders of a system that was never built for them, rebelling against said systems. And so yes, it is debatable how much Spider-Gwen was intended to be trans by the directors of Spider-Verse. Maybe they did intend her to be trans and couldn't get it done because the studios wouldn't let them, which would be its own other discussion about how systems don't allow people to be seen. But ultimately, in terms of the film's relatability to trans people, along with many other groups, that doesn't matter.
When I feel alone, like no one understands what I'm going through, I remember my friends who get it.
And in terms of the intentions of the Spider-Verse movies overall, the first film in the series is quite literally about how anyone can see themselves in these characters.
Anyone can wear the mask. You could wear the mask. If you didn't know that before, I hope you do now.
And the second film is saying these characters are about people who the system fails. Fuck the system, we don't reaffirm the system. And finally, trans people don't need to validate seeing ourselves to those who would rather we don't exist in the first place. So I hope that made that clear, but here's the thing. It's not just these individuals that I want to discuss in this video. I'm not here to do a takedown of the anti-woke mob assholes. I mean, I am here to do that, but I have a much, much bigger agenda. Yes, the trans agenda. Because even when a movie features an intrinsically, explicitly transgender character in a film by an explicitly transgender creator, people still miss the point. Nimona is a recently released film based on a webcomic series created by N.D. Stevenson, one of his first ever projects. And the comic version tells the story of a punk rock anarchistic shapeshifter named Nimona who teams up with Lord Ballister Blackheart, a knight, in order to take down a futuristic medieval kingdom.
You know, to help you do whatever it takes to get revenge on the cold, cruel world that rejected you, shall we pillage a village, lay low until they don't remember you, and then we rise like a fiery phoenix from the ashes to overthrow the government. Or we could just talk.
N.D. Stevenson, who also helped create the amazing She-Ra and the Princesses of Power series, is himself non-binary and trans-masked, and often related his writing of Nimona's shape-shifting to him figuring out his own gender identity back when he was writing the story.
You don't realize how that discomfort has turned to outright pain until you start to see it being relieved, which for me is what transition has been, these little steps of finding myself and what I am in the world. But still, I am not just one thing, just like her. No one is. I did not always understand my own transness or other people's transness. It would be years before I started to understand myself. The book was a way of creating these queer characters that I could live vicariously through and explore those parts of myself in a safe place.
Writing about and finding yourself within fictional worlds is often a common experience for many trans and queer people. Be it playing as a character that reflects your actual gender identity in a video game, writing or creating art, or imagining yourself in your favorite fictional settings like Star Trek, queer and trans people are used to making our own worlds in our head when the one that we exist within is not enough for us and never allows us to see ourselves. And that's what Nimona as a story was about from the start. A queer and trans story by a queer and trans artist about how he felt that he did not fit into a society that constantly pushed him out. In sharp contrast to the Spider-Verse film, which is attempting to bolt on queer and trans themes to the weight and history of the canon of the Spider-Man character that it is both putting itself into conversation within and talking about within its text, Nimona is free of that weight of history of storytelling and is itself explicitly queer and intrinsically transgender right from its inception, something understood expressly right from the off by those who consume it and those who made it.
Nimona really is, in essence, this love letter to all those who've ever felt misunderstood. But she has found a way of connecting with even more passionately to members of the LGBTQ community. And that was something that was very important for us and very early on at Blue Sky to do that in a truthful and honest way.
So that's perhaps why every single article from mainstream outlets about Nimona the film focuses solely on the story's transgender aspects.
Nimona's LGBT romance is an adorable way to end Pride Month. Nimona, Netflix's remarkable trans rights animated movie, is here. Nimona is the queer movie of the moment.
Now, I'm glad that Nimona is being recognized for what it is, that it is a queer and trans text. But the way Nimona was being discussed in that context simply filtered the discussion of Nimona as if it was like every other movie, that just happened to have moments of consumable trans and queerness within it. Take this Time magazine article titled "The Deeper Meaning Behind Nimona's Shape-Shifting Story," a supposed deep read of the film by a major news outlet. The article opens up with a description of this scene from the movie.
The shape-shifting, does it hurt or does it...
I feel worse when I don't do it. Like my insides are itchy. You know, like that second right before you sneeze? That's close to it. Then I shapeshift, and I'm free.
What if you held it in? If you didn't shapeshift?
I'd die.
Good Lord, that's horrible.
Don't be so gullible. I wouldn't die. I just sure wouldn't be living.
Then the article goes on to interpret said scene through a transgender lens.
Here, shapeshifting can be seen as an allegory for trans identity, and it has, by fans of the webcomic turned graphic novel by the same name upon which the movie is based. To many of them, that itchy insides feeling is gender dysphoria. It feels fitting. Nimona author N.D. Stevenson, who also served as a co-producer on the film, is non-binary and transmasculine, and he came out after writing the comic.
And this is the same way that most of the article discusses its analysis of the film, filtering the discussion of the movie solely through the character of Nimona and focusing on her solely as a transgender-style character who suffers from dysphoria through her shapeshifting, focusing on the hardships a trans person faces in being able to be their authentic selves. The same mass market consumable story that we always hear about trans people, that it's just trans people just fighting to be their full selves and exist as the person that they know themselves to be. A story that is now concentrated and packaged to sell Nimona the film as. A story of how much pain and hardship Nimona went through. Without realizing that Nimona, as a film, is pure chaos, energy, punk, tear down the fucking system, holy shit, gremlin energy, god.
Let's fucking go!
Nimona is not a movie simply about a protagonist who suffers from being a trans-adjacent style character, but one in which the story itself is intrinsically about a transgender and queer relationship to the worlds and systems in which they and we live. Nimona is set in a world of medieval fantasy and cyberpunk aesthetics, already showing the mashing of two seemingly opposing ideas just in its ethos, future and past. Just like how transness shows that boys and girls are not opposites but just variations upon a theme of being human, this setting in Nimona ultimately highlights the two genres' similarities. Fantasy worlds and stories are often about a long, arcane history rooted in tradition. Take Harry Potter and its wizarding school of Hogwarts, which is rooted deep in its foundation on wizard supremacy. Similarly, cyberpunk is a genre about hyper-capitalist systems that embed themselves into defining people through controls of one's bodies through economic and technological means. Fantasy and cyberpunk are both about these larger systems that root themselves and try to make themselves invisible in control of people's bodies, with cyberpunk being much more explicitly anti-capitalist than fantasy. Nimona, however, in this world, as a shapeshifter, is ostracized by this society as a monster. She has no place within it and inherently understands that it will never have a place for her. Yet, the important nuance is how the movie understands why she can never fit in. Importantly, Nimona is not shown to be a teenage girl who happens to be able to shapeshift into other forms. Instead, the film makes very clear that whatever form Nimona is at the moment is who Nimona is at the time.
Can you just be you, please?
I don't follow.
Go, you.
But I'm not a girl. I'm a shark.
In that scene, Nimona is not saying, I'm a girl who transformed into a shark. She is saying she is literally a shark right at that moment. She is not something else pretending to be something else. By her shape-shifting ability, it's who she is. And this is why the world around her ostracizes her. The world around her demands rigidity, that things be easily definable, static, and understood. Put into boxes.
Fuck boxes!
I might be more angry, because been dealing with a lot of boxes from moving. As a result, the movie is not about Nimona as a dysphoric, allegorical trans person trying to figure out her identity and come into her true self, but an indictment of a system that makes her feel ostracized and monstrous just by who she is inherently.
Kids. Little kids. They grow up believing that they can be a hero if they drive a sword into the heart of anything different. And I'm the monster?
The man she works with, Ballister, in the film version is a wrongfully convicted lower-class gay knight framed for killing the Queen, a sovereign who sought to include him in her anti-monster police force. For her, Ballister was a token of inclusion, just someone to represent that, hey, she was including people of the lower class in her police force.
He doesn't come from a noble bloodline, but he might just have the heart of a hero.
But in reality, the system that he was working with, the knights around him, his coworkers, and the society were never shifted to accommodate him. He had to shift who he was in order to fit into their system.
Hey Ballister, listen man, I just wanted to say, I know I've always been tough on you, and I never thought you belonged here.
And?
And what?
Nor did the Queen do anything demonstrable to change the system so that others like him would be able to also fit in within the system. It was just him as a token of diversity in her police force, ultimately there to uphold the same society.
Starting today, any of you should be able to hold the sword if you want it, if you earn it. I've watched this young man earn it many times over.
The Queen is a very neoliberal Democrat-style figure, arguing that Ballister can inspire other minorities to pick themselves up by their bootstraps to work within the system, while doing nothing demonstrably to actually change the livelihoods and comfortability of those who come from Ballister's background.
And as soon as he's framed for killing the Queen, he's cast out and vilified without even a hint or moment of checking to see if he might not have actually done it. Eventually though, Ballister learns that the second in charge under the Queen, the director, is the woman who framed him. And ultimately Ballister starts to believe that he can just replace her and that the system will be okay. That it's just a few bad apples that need to be removed. But as Nimona understands, that never will be the case.
Damage people's faith in the Institute.
No duh.
Look, I don't know why she framed me, but the Institute's not the problem. The director is.
They brainwashed you good. You think this stops with the director? You should be questioning everything right now. The will of Glorit, the Institute, the wall? What's it all really for?
For protecting the realm.
Oh, you mean from villains like you?
The director understands this much better than Ballister does. She understands that Ballister's inclusion is a crack in the wall the system was built upon, the foundation of the structure that it requires in order to continue functioning, with every piece having a place and every piece knowing its place.
I beg the Queen not to question the word of Glorith. Not to question what's kept us safe for 1,000 years. But she wouldn't listen. Allowing Ballister to hold the sword was the first crack in the wall.
The system was never meant to include Ballister, and the director understands this. That's why even when Ballister can find proof of her lies and shares it publicly, even her stating these things to others, the director can twist it.
That is not me in the recording. I know it looks like me and sounds like me, but it is not me. That was the monster, working with the real Queen Killer, Ballister. They are trying to trick you.
That's a lie.
We are under attack by something that can take any form. It could be anyone. Your spouse, your child, your best friend, the person sitting next to you.
She calls it fake news and uses it to reinforce the system, make people even more distrustful of each other and their neighbors. It's fascism rising, stoking fear of the other off of the back of the heroes that need to come and save the system. On top of this, the director finds an old scroll dating back to the start of her society that shows Nimona as the villainous monster. Yet we later learn that this is a convenient lie, the foundational lie that was started at the beginning of this system and society, the one in which it is built upon. The idea that Nimona is unnatural, criminal, and a perversion of nature.
She's Glorith's monster. She's come back to finish what she started, and she's using you to do it.
It mirrors how trans and queer people are also always viewed as perversions, unnatural, and abnormal, even though we have always existed throughout history.
Not so much about making children accept transsexuals and gays and drag queens and so on, which would be good, being tolerant. This is also about accepting the most demeaning sexual behaviours, whippings and all that kind of stuff, a perversion really of affection.
It also showcases how fascism builds itself up by pretending to make the systems that it rises out of, because fascism always rises out of other systems, feel natural and normal by relying on how long those systems have been around and how the people within those systems has forgotten that there's anything other than the system itself. But these lies that the director finds only proves how long the system has been hurting people. It's the system justifying its own harm by saying, we have always harmed people, this is just the way we do things, isn't this the way it always should be? Isn't this natural and normal? Fascism is not the system failing. It is the system reinforcing its dominance against those who would try to change its rules from within because they realize that the system is failing them. Almost like how a specific social media platform was made much worse and much more explicitly hostile to trans people when a particular asshole took it over. But it was always a platform that stoked antagonism. I wonder what social media platform I could be talking about.
What if we've always been wrong?
And this is all something that Nimona recognizes needs to be destroyed. The fantasy world system of the movie, not Twitter. But also Twitter. Also, random aside, I'm on Blue Sky now, follow me there. However, Ballister, despite being tokenized then vilified by the system, still wishes to uphold it, thinking that if he hews closer to it, that he tries to make himself fit into it, he can still exist as his full self, without realizing what he is losing in the process of trying to make himself fit into a mold that was never built for him. On top of that though, because he feels that he can do it, because he is able to at least mask or pass in this society, he tries to press those same assumptions and putting someone into a mold, a definable identity, onto Nimona, saying,
Can you please just be normal for a second?
Normal?
I just think it'd be easier if you were a girl.
Easier to be a girl? You're hilarious.
I mean, easier if you looked human.
Easier for who?
Basically, he's trying to say, well, if you weren't so threatening, if you weren't so different and weird, people wouldn't hate you. And he constantly tells her to tone down her desire to break the system that is literally trying to murder her. Basically, he's trying to civility politics Nimona, saying that you should be nice to people who are explicitly trying to murder you, and confine yourself to their expectations.
The Republicans introduced over 600 bills against the LGBTQ community. That's because of elections. And over 70 of them have already passed. When you say, I don't care about winning and I don't care about elections, what you're saying is, I'm super selfish leftist activist and I'd like to build my cloud. But meanwhile, I'm willing to throw trans people and the entire LGBTQ community under the bus, knowing that these bills are gonna pass because we're laser focused on a losing issue. But idiot activists, yes, I just called you an idiot. Activists go in there and go, no, I'm gonna fall right into that trap and I'm gonna fight on the only losing ground we have so we can elect more Republicans so they can pass more anti-LGBT laws.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to put that here. That wasn't a clip from Nimona. That was a clip from the Young Turks recently doing that in real life to trans people. See this video by the fantastic Benjamin Carrillo for that speed run into transphobic rhetoric being done by Anna and Jenk over there. Anyways, I meant this clip.
For you. A lot of people aren't as accepting as me.
This is what Nimona as a story is about. People who do not fit into systems, and those who try to uphold the system, who try to fit into the system, and those who realize that the system needs to be taken apart because it is built on a foundation of exclusion, pain, and vilification of those who are seen as different. Yet this indictment of a system is never what people discuss when it comes to Nimona in a mainstream context. And this is reflected in the complete misunderstanding by mainstream outlets of the importance of Nimona's backstory as it's portrayed in the film. When Ballister, who constantly tries to figure out Nimona by not seeing her, but just seeing how she doesn't fit in, asks how she became a shapeshifter, asking Nimona to justify why she exists as the way she is, not believing that she could just be that way. Because the system never told them that people could exist this way.
Made a wish to one day be trapped on a subway with an uptight knight asking me small-minded questions.
And Nimona makes fun of Ballister, never acknowledging why or how she came to shapeshift, because it's not about how. This is who she is. She is just Nimona.
I'm just trying to understand what I'm working with here.
I'm Nimona.
That explains literally nothing.
But later on in the story, we do get a backstory of a different sort for Nimona. Not about how she became a shapeshifter, but about what she's dealt with in her life. And this backstory is incredibly important, but the most misunderstood part of the film. One of the worst reviews and discussions I've seen of Nimona was done by a critic on RogerEbert.com that stated this.
Nimona feels more like a dramatized checklist of stylistic and emotional beats from both Pixar and DreamWorks Animation Studios' greatest hits. There are some lightly likable, dad-friendly puns, sight gags, and a bunch of angsty declaiming about questioning authority, being true to yourself, and other bumper sticker-ready slogans. Their hearts are in the right place, but their mouths, and doe eyes, and glass-cutting jawlines just pay lip service. Case in point, while Nimona obviously matters to the plot and exhaustively detailed themes, she's eventually prescribed with the sort of backstory that even Nimona, in an earlier scene, scoffs at.
God, this review reminds me of the bad review that inspired my making the Matrix Resurrections video. This review completely misses the point of the two opposing backstories that we are shown, because the second backstory, Nimona's true backstory, reveals not how Nimona became a shapeshifter, but why the society around her was built up around excluding and vilifying her. Because she was different, because adults told her friend she was a monster, her best friend attempted to kill her and then built a wall to keep her and others like Nimona out and murdered them with its division. And then she built up a force literally to keep its citizens in with fear of what lay outside, of difference, instead of being excited about what they could find, about what they could see, the new exciting things that Nimona's friend saw in Nimona as a child, difference, and taking joy in it. Instead of that, she built a system around fearing that difference. Nimona feels alone and oppressed not because she is trans, but because she is not accepted and is vilified by a system that views her as strange, as different, as queer.
I don't know what's scarier. The fact that everyone in this kingdom wants to run a sword through my heart. Or that sometimes I just want to let them.
The system will never include her because of who she is, and the dysphoria she feels is not inherent to who she is. She did not feel dysphoric before this system existed, but it is because she is not allowed to shapeshift, to be her whole self at all times, because it would be dangerous to be so. That's the dysphoria that she feels. Not inherent to her, but because the system was built to exclude her. Just like so many systems today are built to exclude all those but at the top. Be it how racism was literally written into the United States Constitution, how religious groups constantly build up this idea of there being a normal and natural way to exist with a man and a wife, excluding queer and trans identities. And by the way, it's not incidental that the director in the film is depicted like a religious figure given N.D. Stevenson's religious upbringing.
I had kind of an interesting upbringing. I grew up in the South in a very, very conservative religious family, and I was homeschooled. So my parents were not fans of cartoons, just in general. So we didn't really watch cartoons until a certain point. Even like Disney princess movies, my parents, they always had a reason. It's like, you know, Ariel disobeys her father.
These systems build themselves up on the lies of tradition that hide the truth of human complexity. And it's so necessary to realize that the film ends not with a big fight with Nimona beating the director, but climaxes with Nimona almost dying by suicide in a moment of rage and pain and hurt due to the rejection by all those she loved and who thought loved her, but who made her feel unwanted, less than, due to her being different. That is the emotional climax of the movie, not beating the bad guy. Today, transgender people, especially trans teens, are dying and being genocided. So many trans people are being legislated against in the United States right now, with more anti-trans legislation, most of it aimed at kids, being put forth in the last few years the entirety of the US's existence. A system literally attempting to build itself up further upon the lies that are foundational to it, to continue to exclude and vilify, as those who have always been excluded fight to be seen more and more, who refuse to be ignored more and more. Fascism is not the system failing. It is the system reinforcing its dominance against those who would try to change its rules from within because they realize that the system is failing them. The system is attempting to take transgender kids from their parents and force them to be something that they are not. Many laws are trying to force trans people to be outed by authority figures, forcing teachers to tell parents if their kid comes out to them as trans. These laws exclude trans kids from bathrooms and sports, from community, from needed health care. And trans kids are made to feel alone, unloved, and unwanted. It is by no means incidental then that they also face one of the highest suicide rates in the US. The dysphoria, the pain they feel is absolutely real and genuine. But for many, it comes from a society built around making them feel that way. Built around telling them that they should never, ever be themselves. And the way we save those kids is by showing them empathy and love, as Ballaster does. By saying that they are not alone, that they are seen, their true selves, their heart exposed to the world is seen. But also, it is by tearing down the systems built to lead them to that point where they wish to die or not be themselves. Nimona's dysphoria is because of the system she lives within, not inside of her, and the triumph of the film is not defeating the bad guy. The director's barely even seen in the film's last few minutes. The victory, the true victory, is Nimona being fully seen and the society that vilified her being shifted and changed fundamentally. Even allowing Ballaster to finally be with his lover, Goldenloin, allowing them to exist beyond the walls and boxes that they had been holed up within their entire lives. This is the fundamental emotional core the whole film centers around, the toll of a system on our souls. It's about making those in power uncomfortable because it is necessary, not just as a fuck the system, but to save lives, trans lives, marginalized lives, human lives. And this is a nuance that is necessary to see within these films to understand what they are about, but it requires you to be uncomfortable to recognize it. It's asking you to confront that discomfort and ask you why you wish to uphold a system that excludes others, and also ask you to think about if you are also uncomfortable existing within this system yourself. Because films like this are about getting you to recognize that, hey, maybe while you still fit into the society a little bit more, that this society is also failing you. That you are uncomfortable every day, constantly worrying about your next paycheck, or how people see you, or if you're going to be able to get a job or pay your bills, or all of these things. This is the discomfort the film is asking you to recognize and grapple with. But it is a discomfort that the media mainstream discourses around films and works of art like this never wish to confront directly, but instead make it seem like films like this are simply accommodating trans narratives into pre-existing story molds. All while medicalizing and pathologizing us while it does so, instead of recognizing how we, as trans people, are disrupting and destroying their stories. These stories are not about a hero's journey to reaffirm a status quo, it's about who the status is not quo for and what it does to us. Every article and mainstream review about Nimona just wants to talk about the film in terms of gender dysphoria, this thing that frames trans people as objects of pity needing to be taken care of or understood, rather than confronting why we feel the way we do that is discussed within the film. Or the reviews just say that this is a regurgitation of Pixar and Disney narratives, instead of recognizing how this film is a literal disruption of that story, about how this story is not about the hero defeating the bad guy, but destroying a system that constantly creates heroes that need to defend it, and how those heroes are ultimately doing more damage than harm by upholding said status quo. The way the mainstream wishes to discuss stories of transness and queerness always try to make them the consumable, easily understood tales of pain and suffering, not a discussion of what it would take to see us thrive, because that would mean questioning the very systems in which these outlets also themselves are built up upon. All of this is why I find the discourses surrounding films like these so disappointing yet not surprising in the least. It's focusing on consumable versions of being queer and trans without wrestling with the fact that art like this is about how queerness exists as something seen as queer, strange, or indifferent, and how that is inherently an indictment of the systems that force people to be seen that way. Systems of capital that try to make things seem individual and consumable, made for mass market consumption and easily understood in a box that can be bought and sold. How even these systems can make things that were seen as queer marketable and sellable, like the Marvel sweatshirt that I was wearing earlier in this video, rather than address what it means to be queer or have demonstrable queer heroes or protagonists in films. And it leads ultimately to shallow understandings in the mainstream of what queerness is, how to represent it in our stories, and how we think about it and talk about it. For example, Blue Sky Studios made the majority of Nimona, and the film was originally going to be distributed by Disney of all people. Disney even funded the film up to it being 75% completed until, according to Blue Sky animators, Disney as a company took issue with the same-sex kiss between Ballister and Goldenloin, eventually pulling out of releasing the film and destroying the studio that made it. If it was not for Annapurna coming in to finish the animation, we would never have seen the film.
So we were making the movie at Blue Sky for about a year until Disney unfortunately shut the doors on Blue Sky in April of 21.
Slight hitch.
Yeah.
A small one.
Yeah, when you're making these things, I mean, movies are hard to make. There's a number of things that can trip you up. Being shut down by a giant parent studio is not typically one of those things you see coming, and it usually harkens the end of all things. But there's such amazing support and compassion and love for Nimona as a character, and we ended up finding Megan Ellison, who saw those reels, who runs Annapurna, and she just felt such immediate connection. And I think that's the magic of this movie and this character is when you watch it, you just feel somehow connected, regardless of your story and your background. You just feel a connection with it. And so she stepped in and helped us sort of reach into the void and pull the movie back to life.
Disney didn't take issue with the queerness of the film's story, just the visible, consumable version of queerness in the form of a kiss. Yet what's funny is the relationship between Ballister and Goldenloin is inherent throughout the film, even without the kiss. Ballister only worries about how Goldenloin sees him and not the rest of the system, and is upset at how Goldenloin doesn't see who Ballister actually is.
Did you see the way he looked at me? He really thinks I killed the queen.
Everyone thinks you killed the queen.
Goldenloin, as hinted at by his name, is also himself a perfect encapsulation of how power is often given hereditarily, as Goldenloin only gets his position through nepotism and the class that he was born into, something that even he himself is frustrated with, even at one point in the film thinking about how he hates the box that this puts him in. Something that he cannot express but just has to constantly hold in. This rage and anger that is so deep inside of him, and yet he can't ever express or feel lest it ruin his place of privilege within said system.
What else is he hiding? Who's the real him? Who am I? A direct descendant of Glorith? I never asked for that. Now everyone expects me to arrest Ballister, and if I don't, I'm a traitor to you, and if I do, I'm a traitor to him. Oh, and on top of that, I chopped off his arm. His arm! Who chops off an arm? Because I was trained to? Arm chopping is not a what? I'm fine, Director.
Goldenloin's story goes to what I was talking about earlier, how queerness is not an othered theme that is only understood by trans and queer people, but a universal theme that everyone who watches movies like this relates to. We are all put in boxes, all made to feel like we aren't a part of a whole system or have to live up to something that we don't wish to. These stories are about self-discovery through finding who we are and how we let others know that, rather than self-discovery by finding our purpose and place in a society that has no use for us otherwise.
It's also important to note that both Goldenloin and Ballister are people of color. We see how the director tries to kill both Ballister and Goldenloin several times. It's interesting how the racism and queer-coded hatred of monsters come from the same source, the same system, and violence against those groups both come from a fear from the system due to their simple visibility, which the system sees as tantamount to an attack on itself. Similarly, we can notice how transphobia leveled at films like this and Spider-Verse also almost always comes coupled with racist stuff.
But Miles Morales sports a Black Lives Matter sticker on his backpack at the 39-second mark, which you can see right here in the actual picture. So again, one of the funniest things to me is that Spider-Verse literally is only for identity politics, to the point where we have every single form of spider person you possibly can, and everybody wants to pretend as if they're the main Spider-Man, that they're the one that matters, but ultimately the only Spider-Man that really matters is Peter Parker. Everybody knows that. Even Miles Morales, as good as his game was, and I did very much enjoy the Miles Morales games, ultimately it felt like I was just playing another person who was cosplaying as Peter Parker playing Spider-Man. Like that's all it felt like. It's sad to see that a cartoon like this, which probably could be very good, like the first one was very good, this one could be very good as well, but they just have to throw in modern day messaging. Why? What's the purpose? What is the absolute purpose to showcase a BLM sticker? Something that has never done anything for black people whatsoever. The organization BLM has done absolutely nothing for black people, literally zero.
Again, these people upholding these same systems. For them, wokeism is anything that is a crack in the wall, a break in the system of white supremacy, gender essentialism, patriarchy, colonialism, and capitalism, all interlocking systems stemming from the same place and the same desire to put those on top and keep them there.
How would people react if Miles Morales had a Blue Lives Matter, while his dad is a cop? Would people have the same response? Would the woke lunatics be praising it? But no, because they're promoting a terrorist organization and Black Lives Matter, now that's all cool. We're gonna praise that. That's incredible.
Even the typical hero in a hero's journey, that hero with 1,000 faces, is only there to serve the status quo that only serves those at the top. Even Goldenloin, the typical hero in most hero journeys tales, the chosen one, is frustrated by those expectations and has to hide that fact, and ultimately does, for most of the film, uphold the same system that is failing his partner and keeping them apart.
Like how Spider-Gwen's father is symbolically shown in the Spider-Verse films to accept Gwen by giving up his position as a cop, so too does Goldenloin's ability to be with his lover is symbolized by his refusal to act the role of cop for the director. Both Spider-Gwen's father and Goldenloin, two characters who have to learn to accept their queer-coded family member, have to do so by turning down a role that upholds the status quo via violence.
That monster is a threat to our very way of life!
And what if we're wrong? What if we've always been wrong?
His ability to be his whole self with Ballister at the end is only allowed when the system that vilified Ballister fundamentally changes. It's their entire story and their queerness is inherent to that. Yet Disney only had a problem with their kiss. Their easily visible, easily definable, easily mass market consumptionable version of queerness that is easily put into a box and understood by the mass media as, oh, that's what queer representation is, a kiss.
To be clear though, their kiss is a massive moment. I don't want to downplay it at all. Same-sex kisses have been heavily censored throughout the history of US animation. But there is something deeper than this kiss.
Because that's how Disney, a big mega corporation, is used to selling queerness. I mean, we've all talked about how Disney always has the first ever queer representation, they constantly use it to market their films, but let's be even more specific. I mean, compare Ballister and Golden Loin to Annika in Black Panther 2, another Disney film. At the end of the movie, Annika kisses her lover right on the head, a moment used to signify by the film that they are queer. Yet, importantly, Annika does not exist as queer for the entire rest of the film. What I mean by that is I'm not saying that she needs to march around in a pride flag declaring like, I'm a lesbian, I like women, I like boobies. But she does not at any point throughout the film talk about her partner as if she's just a part of her life. She never mentions her feelings as a queer person and her relationship with that to her experience in Wakanda, or even relate it to how queer people are treated in the United States. She is not queer within the film until she is in a very visible, easily consumable moment in order to sell to Disney's audience that they have queer inclusion. That is the definition of a marketable version of queerness and queer identity rather than inclusiveness. She had queerness bolted onto her as a selling point, a bullet item, rather than having queerness woven into the fabric of who she is as a character within that story. And this is how we represent queerness and transness throughout all of our media, as just these shallow signifiers of like, hey, there's a trans poster on the wall. Hey, they had a trans flag. Hey, look, we have this one trans character in the background as a secondary character to a secondary character to a secondary character within the film. But even worse, to my mind, as someone a part of the trans community, it leads to trans folks ourselves only being able to understand and see ourselves by and through these shallow signifiers of our identity. I saw this post going around Twitter and Blue Sky about Nimona, with someone from the LGBTQ community arguing that, oh, Nimona must be trans because there's a trans flag in the background at one point in the movie, doing the same thing that many folks were doing with Spider-Verse, trying to validate that this film is trans by explicit representations of transness. But unlike Spider-Verse, where queer and trans themes were being layered into a pre-existing story and a pre-existing superhero, Nimona is queer from its inception, right to N.D. Stevenson's inspiration for it. It's literally woven within, there's no need to justify it with a trans flag. Yet trans people, and all of us, are so trained to look for queerness by external signifiers, not in representation of our actual life, emotions, and experiences, because we are so starved to feel seen, to be understood by society, that we don't think anyone understands us, so we just look for a sign that we're there, that someone recognizes and sees us. And we don't have a connection to what we all feel underneath as queer and trans people, because we are never told that that's a story worth telling. But Nimona is not gender fluid because there's a trans flag in the background. She's gender fluid, period. End of statement. And this removal of the context and understanding of what it means to be queer ultimately allows queerness to just be seen as the marketable, visible versions.
To quote my friend Swolsome, everyone wants stories of trans pain, but never stop to ask why we're hurting. They don't want to hold up a mirror. They want to live in a comfortable fantasy that trans people are suffering at the hands of other people, the ones who are hateful directly, like it's all coming from direct acts of violence and not a system meant to exclude us that they continue to uphold.
And because it's shallow, it doesn't have meaning, people don't understand how to relate to queer people because they don't understand what being queer is about, means it's very easy to stoke anger and hatred at queer people because they don't understand us. And it's also important to recognize that the consumable version of queerness is the thing that is being targeted most directly right now. I mean, look at the abuse targeted at trans people in our society. I mean, very clearly, trans people, and specific trans people, are being harassed, targeted, and abused, but the most visible, most virulent anti-trans hate campaigns have all centered around corporate versions of queerness. Target and their Pride merch, or Bud Light and their transgender marketing campaigns, or whether or not like a queer person appears in a movie, whether there's a transgender movie poster.
The fact of the matter is that our betters in children's media have decided that they wish their values to be placed before the eyes of your children. And it starts off subtle. Like if you look at that Big Hero 6 clip, I mean, aside from the fact that you now have a robot talking about tampons, You have just that trans man in a transgender flag.
These are the targets of right-wing outrage merchants. Consumable queerness, how queerness has been commodified as a symbol because rage against the marginalized, how these systems perpetuate themselves, turning us against each other in order to fuel hate between us by giving us external signifiers by which to symbolize which team we're on that ultimately mean nothing in order to dehumanize us because we're seeing each other as products. And even these movies themselves, which are baked in queerness, are themselves products of these systems existing alongside or within them. The directors of the Spider-Verse movie caused their employees to work 70-hour work weeks, which is unacceptable for numerous reasons, not the least of which that one, it showcases that those in charge mismanaged the project to make it be able to be doable within reasonable work hours, and two, the studios had a release date that they needed to meet for their shareholders and only so much money that they were willing to spend, and so the workers on the ground making this wonderful, great work of art had to work themselves to the bone. Netflix itself released Nimona on the same platform as their anti-trans Dave Chappelle specials, which they plan to release more of, by the way, and it's on the same platform that canceled Dead End Paranormal Park, a freaking excellent animated series featuring a trans man lead protagonist that you should definitely check out because it's so good, and I also did an interview with Hamish, the show's creator, who is absolutely wonderful.
The Dave Chappelle special was the first time Netflix actually had to reckon with the identity that people had assigned to Netflix wasn't what they thought it was.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you read that like open letter memo sent to the thing, which was sent to the employees, which was just like, hey, if you get easily offended, you better work somewhere else. And I'm like, what? What does that mean? I basically never wanted me making a show with them to be misconstrued as I support Dave Chappelle or I support Ricky Gervais or obviously not. And I feel heartbroken for like the actual people that were like worked in the building at Netflix having to do that walkout and like not be listened to. And
Disney itself, by the way, canceled and mishandled Owl House, another animated show with non-binary and queer characters and themes woven throughout it. Hell, even the animation style of Spider-Verse, which was so provocative when it first came out in the first film, has been now used in movies like Puss in Boots or the upcoming Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. And while those films I'm sure will be fantastic, the TMNT fans need a win. I saw those Michael Bay films. It also signals how Hollywood is now moving to make what made Spider-Verse so special and make it ubiquitous, meaningless, and easily sellable. Yet these queer movies know that they are a part of these complex capitalist systems. They literally scream it to have you recognize it. I mean, at one point in Nimona, Ballister and Nimona are playing a version of Monopoly, a game made to explain how capitalism is terrible, frustrating, and dull, and then was bought by a capitalist and mass-markedly sold and made into a shitty game that everyone hates to play and only enjoys when they cheat at it. And then a cheater's version of the game was also made because capitalism makes every critique of itself part of itself. And guess what? Nimona looks at that and says, the only way to win the game is to breathe fucking fire on it!
You didn't tell me you could breathe fire.
Oh.
Metal.
The Matrix films, another series of transgender movies about how capitalism presses you into molds, literally ends with a Rage Against the Machine song, and people just went while watching it, oh, that song is about AI and Neo fighting the literal machines of the movie. Oh, isn't technology creepy and going to kill us all? No, technology is not creepy. The way capitalism uses algorithms and tech to kick people out of jobs and make it impossible for people like the WGA writers to be able to survive and pay their bills as artists, while also making art demonstrably worse because machine learning, stealing from others, and mashing them together makes incoherent nonsense art is what's fucking awful. I mean, fuck, there's literally a scene in Spider-Verse where we have a black hole that is sucking in everything around it and nearly destroys an entire universe that was created due to the film's villain, a character who is a pissed off dude who feels entitled to be the center of the story and then uses his access to the dead capitalist, the Kingpin's machinery that character used to selflessly recreate his heteronormative family structure in the first film and nearly also destroyed his universe to do so. And Spider-Punk looks at that literal black hole sucking everything in made by these literal capitalist systems and he says, this is a metaphor for capitalism.
It's a metaphor for capitalism.
And then people still miss the point of the Spider-Verse movie. Ah! I'm okay. Most of our popular culture today usually hinges upon upholding the status quo. MCU films are often about superheroed great men and occasionally a token woman defeating people who wish to change the system and have reasonable grievances against it, and so must be portrayed within the context of the universe as over-the-top villains who just want to commit genocides, for example.
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up.
And believe me, I will have opinions on Secret Invasion. But even beyond superhero films, the fabulous Zoe B just did a fantastic video about how apocalypse stories like those found in The Walking Dead, Silo, or The Last of Us are all based on false assumptions and propaganda that humans need the system in place as it is, this neoliberalist capitalist world, or else we would fall into, human nature, which is inherently disarray, chaotic, and naked self-interest.
This lie that greed and individualism are core to human existence tries to make it seem like the dehumanizing behavior that capitalism is based upon incentivizing to function is just core to human existence, despite numerous evidence that shows humans outside of the incentives of capitalism and neoliberalism are more likely to work together than tear each other apart, to form communities rather than be self-interested.
Yet, films like Spider-Verse and Nimona are intrinsically about confronting the systems that refuse to acknowledge people. Spider-Man is in conversation with superhero films, the canon of franchises, and what it means to repurpose those stories for people who they were never meant to be used for in the first place. Nimona is about what it means to tell a queer story within a society that focuses on narratives of heroics, of the great men who constantly reaffirm the system. These films are also about queer rage and defiance, an emotion queer people don't get to express without being labeled monsters. Queer rage that my friend and co-writer Aronach is discussing in her video on Nimona on her channel. But these films are also about how people come together in a community to see each other, truly see each other, and what it takes to bring down systems that oppress everyone. That's why these films resonate so much. That's what a queer story is about. Not the trans flag in a thing, or hey, we got to see two gay men kissing. It's about what it means to be queer, to be seen as strange or different in a society that will never, ever let us be seen as ourselves on our own terms. And by the way, this is not me saying that we don't need explicit representation. We do. Yes, Spider-Verse should make Spider-Gwen explicitly trans in the next film so that bigots can't deny it. If you're going to do art where queerness is being added on, especially like in Marvel movies, and not doing something based on queer art like Nimona, which has a very clear queer subtext from a queer creator, you should say it. You should say that there is queer representation in your work and stop tiptoeing around it, because we need people right now to be clear and vocal, because we're under attack right now. But explicit representation cannot be tokenistic, because it will allow them to constantly vilify us because they aren't seeing us, they're seeing the shallow representations that corporations wish to sell to us, not what queerness actually is, what queerness actually means, because queerness resonates with everyone, because we, all of us, whether you are explicitly LGBTQ or not, feel left out of the system. Explicit representation should come coupled with a holistic understanding of what it means to write, be, and represent queerness. But what this means is that we also need to support trans artists and creators so that they can make said art and be in the room to help create other art, because art like ours isn't what the mainstream wishes to make often. Which, speaking of, in transitions, because I'm a trans person and I can transition well. I don't know what this is. This is the thing that I feel, I'm not, that's the thing that I don't do. I don't do that. I'm making a science fiction film. If you haven't heard, I'm directing a film called Identities, a film that is, I hope, about all the things that I've discussed in this video. It's a cyberpunk story about how systems try to put us into boxes, and that it's by expressing and being our true selves that we can free ourselves. And I've got so many incredible people to be in it, including a primarily queer and transgender cast and crew. I've got Jessica Nicole from Fringe, Abigail Thorne from Philosophy Tube, and as well as John Delancey from Star Trek. Yes, Q, let's just say, is an honorary gay, and Maggie Mae Fish, James Tyson, Ezra Reeves, and so many others. This film to me is a dream project come true, but also my entire life right now. As I said earlier, I just moved into a new apartment, and Identities also films in less than a month. So I'm kind of going stress crazy right now. So with that said, I want you all to know that I do have big videos coming next month in August, including a big video about Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think after that, my best YouTube video ever, which is about Star Wars. Yes, Aaron and I are doing a huge essay and basically an animated movie within that essay, so be prepared. But after those videos and Identities filming, I'm going to be slowing down because I need a break, and I also need to focus on post-production for Identities, or I'm gonna burn out otherwise. So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to all of you who support me on this channel. Your likes, subscribes, and kind words really mean a lot to me, especially right now as I'm kind of gearing up to like take a little bit of a hiatus, which makes me very nervous. And with that said, I also want to say if you can consider supporting me on Patreon, because that's how I pay my bills directly, as well as pay my collaborators like Aronok, who help me on scripts and on other videos and help me edit things so that I don't burn out. It would mean the absolute world to me. Like, Patreon legitimately is how I'm able to do all of this stuff, as well as give myself the chance to rest between videos, because it allows me to know that I'm gonna be able to pay my bills. So thank you everybody. Go support all the creators I mentioned in this video, especially Aronok, who helped with this video, and beyond all that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper. Now fuck the system! Oh god, I hope that didn't land in anything important. I hope I didn't break something. Oh well, fuck it, break it. Break it all. Except for my Archer doll. Don't break Archer. Alright, now time for my favorite part of every video, and that's to say thank you to all of my patrons who help support me doing what I do. I literally could not make videos at all without your support, so thank you so much. And an extra special thank you to Kathleen Beth, Carrie Allen Foss, Joe Herman Holt, Nils Eisborn Idsholm, Lily Gray, Owen Eos, Heather Long, Barbie Ann Rounds, Sarah Montgomery, Eltai Tivy, Cosmic Wave, Jack McAllen, Stephen Kleinard, Hannah Friedrich, Courtney Ray Kelly, Christian Hurst, Michael Wolnetz, Jem Shin, Alex Miller, Samuel Howard, Matt Chung, Randy Thompson, Dark Archon, Chloe Dollar, Super Desi, Baba Rusky, Nisa Mary, Christine S., William Tony, Auntie Kate, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Aylin Altman, Brits Krieg, Wellington Marcus, Alicia Stice, Lily Blanley, Jessica Kimberly, Tara Rose, Meadow Whisper, Board and Mary Beth Earl, Vincent Ellington, Angela Hendricks. Whew, need a breath, sorry. Got carried away. Stephen Coyle, Joelle Gilly, Joseph Dewey, Felicia Tost, Marshall Nye, James Krivda, Zane Schuster, Rose Connolly, Gordon Alexander, Dominic Noble, Zone 1 Librarian, Jennifer Fust, Weirdy Beardy, Sunk Corgi, Sean McKenzie, Nathan Frauchen, Jolene Cassidy, Sonia Nero Perdo, Ferengato, Transit Toronto, AV, Quattro, Sasha M, Truthsta, Rain Corkin, Ryan Hunter, Lev Goodwin, Scott Russell, Shield Maiden 4444, Teague Wilson, Drew Bach, Dwayne L, Damian Rice, W. Randy Edie, Carry On, Stephen Richardson, James, John Weatherby, LK, Breachix Purvis, Autumn Jennings, Jade Persuades, Melinda Walters, Nathan Steele, Matthew Craiglow, Kevin Frottek, Jennifer Fronsdale, Maddie H, Lysa, Sean Piper, Sean Sullivan, Flying Kata, Epsilon is greater than, Devin Camerlock, Casual Observer, Melody Ann, Winter's Good, Mark H. Williams, Author, Flynn, Sarah Leslie Hutchkins, Sarah Byston, The Mighty Ginger Joe, Michael and Katie Hake, Roy Negby, Patricia Crompton, William Stewart, Blueberry Hill, Jess Johnson, Bob Saget, Emma Ramirez, Katie K, Sarah Lemerow, Laura Demerow, Jaffer Day Thomas, Chris Schertz, Becky Sparks, Verdict Sky, Jordy Lucero, Blue, Kurt Mullen, Joe, Zamil Kincaid, Heurissus of Eoluitha, Leo Boyd, Sky Skinnar, Troy Stull, Joe Comics, Luna, Valerie Blackbird, The Tipsy Changeling, Jason Knott, Joanne the Wrench Witch, Marion Herb, Celestial Dawn, Troy Pertz, Grumpy Dragon 75, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Crit Fax, Zophiel, Strawberry Pup, Adam Ardiel Taylor, Callum McDonald of Clan McDonald, Kingy, It's a Bug, Not a Feature, and Abigail Marie. Adore you all. Thank you for allowing me to mispronounce your names publicly, and mwah.